There is a number that haunts Oakland Raiders fans, a number they have tried to forget for over a decade, a number that represents pain, humiliation, and the complete destruction of their defense on a single autumn afternoon. 5. 5 times the ball crossed the goal line. 5 times 68,000 fans at Arrowhead Stadium rose to their feet. 5 times Raiders defenders stood frozen, searching for answers that never came. One man, one game, 5 touchdowns. But here's what makes this story truly devastating. That afternoon was not an anomaly. That game was not a fluke. It was simply the crescendo of a symphony of suffering that this player had been composing against the Raiders for years. Every time he touched the football against Oakland, something inexplicable happened. Statistics that defied logic, performances that seemed personally vindictive, a level of dominance so complete that Raiders fans began to wonder if their team had somehow cursed themselves. He was not the biggest, he was not the fastest, he was not the most hyped prospect coming out of college. But against the silver and black, he transformed into something else entirely. Something Raiders defenders still have nightmares about. Something that earned him a nickname whispered with hatred in every sports bar in Oakland: the Raider Killer. Tonight, I am going to tell you the complete story of this man, how he rose from humble beginnings, why he specifically devastated Oakland unlike any other opponent, and how one October afternoon became the most humiliating 3 hours in modern Raiders history. But I am not going to tell you his name, not yet, because first, you need to understand the full scope of what he did. You need to feel what Raiders fans felt watching him tear their defense apart, year after year, with no answer in sight. Only then will his name mean what it should mean. Only then will you understand why the Raiders still cannot escape his shadow. Let us begin where nightmares are born. The AFC West has always been a division of hatred. 4 teams sharing decades of animosity, playing each other twice every season, building rivalries that transcend sport and become personal. The Raiders and Chiefs rivalry is perhaps the most bitter of all. It began in the 1960s when both franchises were founding members of the American Football League. It intensified through decades of playoff battles, controversial games, and mutual contempt. Oakland fans despised Kansas City. Kansas City fans despised Oakland. This was not manufactured rivalry for television ratings. This was genuine hatred passed down through generations. Into this cauldron of animosity stepped a young running back in 2008. He was not a first-round pick. He was not a second-round pick. He was selected in the 3rd round, 73rd overall out of the University of Texas. The scouting reports were mixed. Exceptional speed, incredible agility, but questions about durability, concerns about his size, doubts about whether he could handle the punishment of being a featured back in the NFL. Those doubts would prove spectacularly wrong. In his rookie season, he showed flashes of brilliance. By his 2nd year, he was becoming a star. But it was against one specific opponent that he seemed to unlock something supernatural: the Oakland Raiders. The first time he truly announced himself to Raiders fans was not a dominant performance by traditional metrics, but it was a warning shot, a glimpse of the horror that was coming. He found running lanes that should not have existed. He made defenders miss in spaces too tight for human movement. He turned routine plays into explosive gains that shifted field position and momentum. Raiders coaches watched the film afterward and found themselves unable to explain what they had seen. Their defenders were in proper position, their scheme was sound, and yet this running back had sliced through them like they were standing still. They told themselves it was an aberration, a lucky game. It would not happen again. They were wrong. The next meeting brought more of the same, and the meeting after that, a pattern was emerging that Raiders fans did not want to acknowledge but could no longer deny. This man owned them. Every running back has good games and bad games. Every player has opponents they struggle against and opponents they dominate. But what was happening between this running back and the Raiders defied normal explanation. His yards per carry against Oakland was significantly higher than against any other opponent. His touchdown rate against the Silver and Black was almost double his career average. His explosive plays, runs of 20 yards or more, came with stunning regularity whenever he faced the Raiders. It was as if he had been specifically engineered to destroy this one franchise. Defensive coordinators in Oakland tried everything. They stacked the box, they brought safeties down, they ran exotic blitz packages designed to disrupt the timing of Kansas City's rushing attack. Nothing worked. He adapted to every adjustment. He found the soft spots in every scheme. He made the Raiders look foolish in ways that other teams facing the same running back simply did not experience. By the early 2010s, Raiders fans had developed a specific dread. Twice a year, they knew what was coming. Twice a year, they watched helplessly as this running back dismantled their defense. Twice a year, they experienced the unique humiliation of knowing they had no answer. And then came October. October 20, 2013. The Raiders entered this game with realistic expectations. They were not a good team that season. They would finish 4-12, continuing a painful stretch of losing that had plagued the franchise for over a decade. But even by those diminished standards, what happened on this afternoon was unprecedented. The Kansas City Chiefs came into Arrowhead Stadium undefeated at 6-0. Their defense was dominant, their offense was efficient, and their running back was about to have the game of his life. From the opening series, something felt different. The Raiders' defense, which had struggled all season, seemed especially lost. Assignments were missed, gaps were exploited, tackling was atrocious, and he was everywhere. First quarter, touchdown. The running back found a seam, accelerated through it, and left Raiders defenders grasping at air. Arrowhead erupted. Oakland's sideline stood silent. Raiders fans watching at home shifted uncomfortably. They had seen this before. They knew what was coming. Second touchdown, this time a pass play. He released out of the backfield, found space in the Raiders' zone coverage, caught the ball, and raced to the end zone. The celebration was louder this time. The Chiefs sensed blood. By halftime, the game was effectively over. The Raiders trailed by multiple scores. Their offense could generate nothing, their defense could stop nothing, and the running back had already accomplished what most players never achieve in an entire game. But he was not finished. Third touchdown, fourth touchdown, each one more demoralizing than the last, each one accompanied by the same sight: Raiders defenders lying on the turf, beaten again by the same player who had been beating them for years. And then came the fifth. Late in the fourth quarter, the game long decided. Any other coach might have pulled his star running back to protect him from injury in a meaningless situation. Kansas City did not pull him. The handoff came. He took it, surveyed the field for a split second, and then exploded through the line. Raiders defenders converged. It did not matter. He was already past them, racing toward the end zone, crossing the goal line for the fifth time that afternoon. 5 touchdowns, 1 player, 1 game. The stadium roar was deafening. The image of him celebrating became an instant classic in Kansas City history. And somewhere in Oakland, fans were turning off their televisions in disgust, unable to watch another second. Final score: Kansas City 56, Oakland 31. But the score did not capture the true devastation. This was not a competitive game that got away from the Raiders. This was a public execution, a demonstration of dominance so complete that it transcended normal football analysis. He finished the day with 20 carries for 200 yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, additional receiving yards, a performance that would be remembered as one of the greatest individual games in NFL history. Against the Raiders. Always against the Raiders. His name was Jamaal Charles. And now that you know who tormented Oakland for the better part of a decade, let me tell you why. Jamaal Charles was born on December 27, 1986, in Port Arthur, Texas. His childhood was not easy. He was diagnosed with a learning disability at a young age, a condition that made school challenging and sometimes isolating. But Charles had two things that would define his future: an incredible work ethic and speed that coaches noticed immediately. At Memorial High School in Port Arthur, Charles became a star running back. His combination of quickness and vision set him apart from other players. College recruiters came calling. He chose the University of Texas, where he would play alongside a roster loaded with future NFL talent. At Texas, Charles showed glimpses of his potential, but was never the featured back. He shared carries, he waited his turn. When the Kansas City Chiefs selected him in the third round of the 2008 draft, many analysts questioned whether he could handle a full workload. Those analysts did not understand what they were watching. Charles had something that statistics could not capture and film could only hint at. He possessed an almost supernatural ability to make defenders miss. His cuts were impossibly sharp. His acceleration was explosive. He could be surrounded by tacklers and somehow emerge from the pile still moving forward. But these gifts alone do not explain his dominance over the Raiders. Other teams had talented linebackers and fast defensive backs. Other teams struggled against Charles at times. The Raiders struggled against him always. So what was it about Oakland specifically that brought out his best? Several theories exist, and each contains elements of truth. The first theory involves scheme. Throughout Charles's career, the Raiders employed defensive systems that happened to be vulnerable to his specific skill set. Oakland frequently used aggressive, attacking defenses designed to disrupt plays in the backfield. Against most running backs, this approach worked. Against Charles, it created exactly the running lanes he needed. When defenders over-pursued, Charles cut back. When linebackers blitzed, Charles found the vacated space. When safeties crashed down, Charles bounced outside. Oakland's aggression became their undoing because Charles was patient enough to let plays develop and explosive enough to punish mistakes. The second theory involves personnel. During Charles's prime years, the Raiders experienced significant turnover on defense. They struggled to draft impact players. They cycled through free agent signings who never panned out. The continuity that builds great defenses simply did not exist in Oakland. Charles faced different Raiders defenses every year, but each version had the same fundamental problem. They lacked the elite talent necessary to match his gifts. Without a dominant linebacker or a shutdown safety, the Raiders had no answer for a running back of Charles's caliber. The third theory is psychological. Once a player establishes dominance over a specific opponent, something shifts in the mental dynamic. The dominant player gains confidence. He knows he can beat this team. He expects to beat this team. That expectation becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. Meanwhile, the dominated opponent begins to doubt. They see the same player who humiliated them before. They remember the missed tackles and the big plays. Fear creeps into their minds, and fear makes athletes hesitate. Hesitation creates the split-second delays that allow great players to exploit weaknesses. By the time the 5-touchdown game occurred in 2013, the Raiders were psychologically defeated before kickoff. They had no belief they could stop Jamaal Charles because experience had taught them they could not stop Jamaal Charles. He had taken up residence in their heads, and he was not paying rent. The damage Jamaal Charles inflicted on the Raiders extended far beyond individual games. During his peak years from 2010 to 2014, the Chiefs dominated the divisional rivalry. Kansas City won the majority of meetings, and Charles was often the difference. His performances swung games that could have gone either way. His touchdowns buried Oakland teams that were already struggling. For Raiders fans, these years were especially painful because they coincided with organizational chaos. The franchise was losing, the roster was weak, and twice every season, they had to watch the league's most explosive running back treat their defense like a personal playground. The 5-touchdown game became a symbol of everything wrong with the Raiders during this era. It represented the talent gap. It represented the coaching failures. It represented the hopelessness that permeated the franchise. Raiders fans do not need to be reminded of that afternoon. They remember every detail. The way Charles seemed to glide through traffic, the way defenders bounced off him, the way the game felt over before it really began. That game does not just live in memory. It lives in the identity of Raiders fandom during the 2010s. It is a reference point for suffering, a shared trauma that binds fans who lived through those years. And Jamaal Charles is the face of that trauma. There is an important caveat to this story that must be acknowledged. Jamaal Charles was not merely a Raiders killer. He was one of the most efficient running backs in NFL history. His career average of 5.4 yards per carry is the highest ever recorded for any running back with at least 1,000 attempts. He made Pro Bowls, he earned All-Pro selections, he destroyed defenses across the league, not just in Oakland. But there is something about divisional rivalries that amplifies everything. The games count double in the standings. The matchups occur twice annually. The hatred runs generational. When you dominate your rivals, it means more. When you become the symbol of their suffering, your legacy is enhanced. Jamaal Charles would have been a great running back even if the Raiders had never existed. But his dominance over Oakland elevated him to legendary status within the AFC West. Chiefs fans do not just remember Charles as a great player. They remember him as the man who broke the Raiders, the man who delivered signature moments of humiliation against their most hated enemy, the man who made Oakland fans physically ill every time he touched the football. That is a legacy that statistics cannot fully capture. That is the power of rivalry. The story of Jamaal Charles and the Raiders eventually found an ending, though not the one either side would have predicted. Injuries caught up with Charles. The same explosiveness that made him devastating also put tremendous stress on his body. He tore his ACL in 2011. He recovered and returned to dominance, but in 2015 he tore it again. The second tear effectively ended his career. He attempted comebacks with Denver and Jacksonville, but the magic was gone. The cuts were not as sharp. The acceleration was not as explosive. Father Time had claimed another victim. Charles retired, having accumulated over 7,800 rushing yards and more than 40 career touchdowns. His numbers would have been significantly higher without the injuries. Many analysts consider him one of the most talented backs of his generation, a player whose peak was as high as anyone who ever played the position. And for Raiders fans, his retirement brought conflicting emotions. Relief, certainly. The nightmare was over. They would never again have to watch that red jersey slice through their defense. They would never again have to endure the annual humiliation of facing a player they simply could not stop. But there was something else beneath the relief, a grudging respect that emerged once the pain subsided. Jamaal Charles was special. He was the kind of player who makes football worth watching. His gifts were rare and beautiful, even when they were being deployed against your team. Years later, Raiders fans can acknowledge what they could not acknowledge during his career. They witnessed greatness. They were victimized by excellence. There is strange honor in being the primary victim of a Hall of Fame caliber talent. Not that they would ever admit this publicly. Today, Jamaal Charles is retired. His playing days are memories. His highlight reels live on YouTube, viewed by new generations who never experienced the terror of watching him in real time. But in Oakland, now Las Vegas, the memories remain fresh.
Older Raiders fans still flinch when they see the number 25 in Chiefs colors. They remember the 5-touchdown game like it happened yesterday. They carry the scars of a rivalry they consistently lost during the Charles era. And somewhere in Kansas City, Jamaal Charles is a legend, a hero who delivered some of the greatest moments in franchise history. A player who owned the Raiders so completely that his dominance became part of the rivalry's identity. The Raider Killer. He earned that name. He earned it with every touchdown, every explosive run, every devastating performance against the silver and black. The Raiders have recovered since those dark years. The franchise has found stability under new ownership and new leadership. They have built competitive rosters. They have won meaningful games. But they have not erased Jamaal Charles from their history. They cannot erase him. He is woven into the fabric of their 21st century struggles, a constant reminder of what it feels like to have no answer for greatness. Every franchise has its tormentors. Every fan base has players they despise because those players caused them pain. This is the nature of sports. This is why rivalries matter. Jamaal Charles caused the Raiders more pain than perhaps any individual player of his generation. He did not just beat them, he demoralized them. He did not just score touchdowns, he scored touchdowns in bunches, in ways that felt personally targeted. 5 touchdowns in one game, a career of dominance in divisional matchups, a legacy built significantly on the suffering of silver and black. That is the story of the Raider killer. That is what Jamaal Charles meant to Oakland. And that is why, even years after his retirement, his name still makes Raiders fans uncomfortable. Some wounds never fully heal. Some nightmares never completely fade. Some numbers, like 5, carry weight that statistics cannot measure. Jamaal Charles was the Raider killer, and the Raiders, despite everything they have accomplished since, have never truly escaped his shadow. If you understand this pain, if you lived through those years, if you remember what it felt like to watch your defense get destroyed by the same player over and over again, then you understand what this channel is about. We tell the stories of Raiders history, the triumphs and the tragedies, the legends and the villains, the moments that defined a franchise, and the players who left permanent marks. Subscribe if you want more stories told with this depth. Share if you know a Raiders fan who needs to relive this particular nightmare. The silver and black endures, but we never forget those who made us suffer, and we never forget the Raider killer.